the cities were actually temple cities because the temple was the economic center of the city. Whatever the temple was supposed to mean or what it meant so far, I think that entire narrative just changed. So when you go into a temple, are you going to a temple to click selfies? So they have actually dug a hole in between and put one pipeline. The most beautiful sculptures have one tap, one electric wiring that is happening. Whoever is doing all this has no idea of the history behind that. I'm all for temples coming away from the latches of the government.
Ramaa Venugopalan is a practitioner and teacher of Bharatnatyam with over 20 years of experience in performing and teaching the ancient art form. She holds a master's degree in Bharatnatyam and its allied subjects such as Bharatiya philosophy, Bharatiya history, and a study of temple architecture. Tune in to this honest and factual podcast brought to you exclusively by Prana Stories.
Vanakkam, ma'am.
Vanakkam, namaskaram.
Namaskaram. So, I feel so privileged, and so lucky that I set up this studio and you are one of the first guests on the podcast. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Praveen. So kind of you and such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I'm actually so excited but nervous also. Excited about the topic that we are going to speak. Nervous because I don't know anything about it. So it's so fascinating to be in that position, I think. So it'll be nice for the audience to give a little bit of your experience of learning Bharatnatyam. Where did you start? And, where did you get where you are right now? What made you reach here? So that'll be, sort of good to sort of talk about it.
Okay. So I started learning Bharatanatyam from Srimati Rangashri, who's the founder director of Kinkini Bangalore. It's a very well-known organization in Bangalore, and they've been doing amazing service in the field of organizing the annual Kinkini festival for almost about 30 years now, I think. So I started learning from her, and I learned from her for about 25 years.
Okay.
I think then she moved out of the country, and then the search began for another teacher. So I've traversed here, there, and then I think I arrived at a point where I felt the need to kind of just focus on whatever I had learned before and see what it could speak to me at that particular point of time. So I think that's when the discovery really happened.
Okay.
After 25 years, at some point of time, you have to stop and say, okay, what have I learned? To even comprehend what you've learned, what you've practiced.
This was how long ago? This.
I think she moved out sometime in 1999.
Okay.
1999 or 2000. So, and in 2004, I set up my own, I started my dance school called as Lakshmi Kalalayam in the memory of my mother. So once Rangashi ma'am moved out, there were few students who were still kind of looking for a teacher. So they'd all learned from me when I was in Kinkini. So a few of us kind of just got together and we thought we'll just practice together and share. So that's how the classes started. I think it was only when I started teaching on my own, a lot more of a deep dive happened. It started questioning what I had learned. When students were asking me, what does this mean? Why are we doing this? I think that's when the whole thing about, okay, what have we learned for 25 years? That deep dive happened. So then it was also a point where one also realizes that you need to know a little bit more, because when you teach, you have to teach with a lot of responsibility. You should have the answers to the students' questions. And most importantly, we are imparting something that we have received. So when we impart, we need to give them something more. We need to sometimes justify what we have learned. We need to inculcate in them the conviction of the form, the rootedness and our culture. So that was a crossroad where I decided, okay, there's so many things that I still don't know. How do I convince my teenagers the relevance of what they're doing? beyond just whatever compositions they learn. How do I tell them to look forward for more? And how do I look forward for more? So at that juncture, this particular course was rolling out. The Shastra University rolled out its Masters of Fine Arts under Dr. Padma Subramaniam.
Okay.
That I think was in 2008 or 2009. I don't remember the year very well.
And where is the Shastra University?
It's in Tanjavur.
Okay.
But they had rolled out this kind of a distance learning program under Dr. Padma Subramaniam.
Wow.
So I'd just given birth to my son. My son was 2 then. So I thought it was the right time to quickly finish a master's program. And the subjects were very interesting. They were talking about temple architecture. They were talking about Indian philosophy. Then, of course, dance was there and a little bit of theory. Just those subjects was very interesting. But I had no clue how they were all associated with dance. When we are learning, when we're doing the compositions, you do one Vishnu here, one Shiva there, then you're doing a Varnam. But we don't really know what exactly is happening because there's nobody to connect those things to you. And lots of times you don't even know. You're just doing it because it's a part of your discipline. So I think those 2 years under Paduaka was the most phenomenal in terms of how she opened out the doors for us to connect all these aspects. And we were a lucky batch. We were the first batch to do that course. So we had a lot of time with her. And as everybody knows, Dr. Padma Subramaniam she's a legend, of course. But her thinking is something else. The way she, her own life story and how she restructured the Karanas and how she came about all that, right? So she shared all that with us very generously. So
you're probably the lucky 11, the first.
Absolutely, 11. Yes, because it was also the first course for the university, for her, for us. So everybody had to kind of really come together and make something worthwhile out of that course. So and then the interest to study books, to learn more about temples, read more about Indian philosophy. Maybe also venture into a deeper path, right? Through thoughts, through your actions. So that journey has been quite, what can I say? It's been organic and it's also been deliberate.
So when you said you learned 25 years with Rangashri ma'am, and then 2 years with Padma Subramaniam ma'am. I mean, I was curious to know, 25 years you were learning under her. I mean, this is a generic question because, I mean, I have also learned a little bit of dance myself. The motivation then used to be, I mean, this could be as lame as it sounds, but I want to be a great dancer or a big dancer, well-known dancer. That used to be the motivation. Or then the name and the fame, everything will come around, and then you just go about that. What was your motivation?
Actually, I had no motivation.
Okay.
There was a rule at home that I cannot miss dance class.
Okay.
So my mother was very particular that I cannot miss any class.
Okay.
And also that particular space, that particular time, right? If you go back about 20-25 years back, so much of noise in the dance industry was not there. First, there were very few dancers, and so many programs was not there. Social media definitely was not there. So we all were in a very comfortable space, and there was enough time. Generally, the pace of life was much more slow, and there was no hurry. There were no prominent goals. So you just focused on learning. Programs would come by. You were still working towards, being a good dancer. What you learn, you should know. You should know the talam. You should dance well. You should keep getting better at it. And then we would do group performances. So it was just a very easy going, time and space and life. So Actually, I never had any goal or there was never like, this is where I need to be.
Okay.
By this time, I should go here, I should go there. It was never like that with me.
The question is also, I mean, dance doesn't really pay your bills, is what I have realized myself.
Yeah.
Because you will have other academics to do, and then you would want to do a job, and then continue dance as a side hustle, and then you do that. That's what generally people do.
Yes.
So what was your take then?
Yes, it was exactly the same. Dance was a very important aspect of my life.
Okay.
I think my father was very clear that academics must play an important role. So
Okay.
I did my graduation in computer science, and
Okay.
that was when the IT boom happened. So all of us had this dream of being in an IT job. So that happened in parallel.
So you were jobbing as well?
Yes, I worked in the IT industry for several years.
Okay.
And then I took a break when my son was born. I took a sabbatical. But until then, it really was about balancing the two. I mean, I won't even say balance, because see, when you spend so many years doing something, right, it just becomes a part of your schedule.
Right.
You don't have to do much to change anything. You have to go to class. When the performance is there, you have to perform. When there's an exam, you have to study, you have to go. It really was a very simple time then.
Yeah.
And all of us were like that. In our generation, or in my generation, we all we were taking dance very seriously. At the same time, whatever academics that we were continuing was there. And even when I had begun to work, the classes still happened.
Nice.
So,
Are you still working?
yes, I still continue to work. I work as a consultant.
Nice.
I just started a couple of years back.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you do IT consultancy, you
Yes.
do your teaching,
Yes.
you also perform,
Yes.
and you also write,
Yes.
and you're also a researcher.
Yes.
Okay. There's so many things that you do.
Though it sounds actually very grand, but I think, and I'm sure you'll agree, that if we just kind of look at a cross section of people, right? I think the present age where we are in, we're all doing multiple things. I think also because there are so many things that enable us to put our feet into multiple things, right? Because we're just sitting in one place. We have information at our hand, literally, right? So it's very easy for anybody who has an interest to dabble multiple areas and explore for themselves. So I don't think I'm doing anything unique, and I'm sure even you're doing so many things. So it's, I think if you have an interest, you just find ways to be with it.
Right.
I think many of us are doing lot more. So I think it's also the space we are inhabiting right now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think a change of a shift happened when you actually did the 2 years course with Madam Padma Subramaniam. So what was that change? What did you feel, and did it give you a new direction, or what happened after that?
I just think it got me a little bit more serious about what I was doing so far.
Okay.
It brought in a great sense of reverence to our tradition, our art form.
Okay.
What until then was just a part of my life, or something that I did seriously, knowing the connections, knowing the rootedness of it, knowing the fact that there is a shastra behind it, and how it is connected with philosophical thoughts, kind of perhaps enhance the value of the art form in my life.
Okay.
So I don't think it was transformative in that sense, but it just made me value more and feel more blessed, really, that I'm fortunate enough to learn this particular art form. I think that's what it did for me personally.
Okay. So that means you went more deep into the history of dance. Was it just Bharatnatyam or dance in general, and the philosophy, and I think history and philosophy was the main
Yes.
key things that you went really deep on.
Yes.
So then, can we just talk about the history of dance as such?
Yeah. So what basically happens when, say, for example, when a young child is going to a teacher, right? So they just go, you start a dance class as a teacher, then you go and you learn. And then you're just kind of learning the dance form for a long time. Then you come to a particular stage, then you're doing your arangetram, and then you start doing your programs. So there is a kind of a set pattern that happens. So everybody is only looking forward. I do my arangetram, then what do I do next? Then life kind of goes very forward, right? What the course really made us do is it made us think backwards, saying, okay, now if I'm learning a particular composition, where is it coming from? Who thought about this composition? And why did they think about it in a certain way? So then you talk about my guru and then her guru and then their guru. Then you really start questioning, saying, okay, where did it originate from? Right? So what the course also made us do is it took us, of course, Natya Shastra was the literature we went back to, and then you took the references from there and said this is how it was done, and this is how the evolution of movement and natakas, everything happened, and then how it was regional and how each of it had a regional flavor, how that particular thought and essence went into it, the aesthetics of it, and of course how it evolved. And it is so intertwined with the very concept of, if you go back to Bharatamuni, who was Bharatamuni? Then he was a disciple of Tandu, and then Tandu was a disciple of Shiva. Then suddenly Shiva comes. So what you generally think as characters are suddenly becoming the root points, and say, okay, can I actually trace back there? Right? It's kind of very fascinating. So then you also have the whole concept of the traditional dance community, the gurus, right? The Varuvu Ramaya Pillai or Kalyana Sundaram Pillai, and all the different banis and what they did to us, and then the entire Devadasi community. So these are all, what do you say? You cannot ever discount them. That is how it evolved. It came through them. So what that particular course did was it just kind of turned us around and said, look back and read about them, understand where they came from, what did they do, what did they contribute. If today we, in a performance, we say, I'm doing a Varnam by this particular guru, then who was that guru and which place did he belong to? And once you get into it, right, it's like a concentric circle. You just keep going and then you keep discovering. And what one person discovers is really his own or her own discovery. And there are so many stories. So I think that one cannot ever disconnect from history. Right. It has flown through that. Yeah. So it's important to be aware of it and know it for what it is. Yes. The good or the bad.
If you go back to history, I'm sure it's such a big ocean, multiple oceans there. But then let's sort of start at one point. I mean, put our time at one location and then probably come from there. So instead of probably going to Brahma and then coming to Shiva and all that, this is what my understanding is, from Shiva, the next gen who carried forward are the Devadasis?
Okay, so now there are several theories for this. So Devadasis, actually, if we go by several studies, right? So what we today refer to as the Devadasis, if you take it in the context of the region of Tamil Nadu or that particular area, they were called as the Isai Vellalar community. Okay. Again, there are several narratives of who they were, where they originated from. But the community were not like a direct descendant from Shiva themselves. Okay, so what also is very important for us to understand is that when we talk about history, we are talking about different timescapes. You're talking about Bharatamuni, Valmiki, Ramayanam, and Natya Shastra dating, and then the closest reference that we can get is the Devadasi community, our Bani, our gurus, who are probably just about 150 years back. Yeah. Now, in my observation and my understanding, there is a time lapse. several things would have conspired and happened in between. So if you go back on that path, you also have the continuing legacy of so many kingdoms, right? And how even the area of our country was. Like, for example, you had the entire Madras presidencies, or it was the Maratha kingdoms, right? So the monarchs, the different dynasties that were ruling our country or was caretaking our country, they had a large role to play in the upkeep of our cultural arts, right? Arts, I mean not just dance. I talk about music, I talk about iconography, I talk about paintings, I talk about, architecture, temple architecture. So it's very difficult to have a linear path and say, okay, I can go like this and I will reach this person. But I would say for us to get to kind of comprehend, I think it helps to go back to at least trace a few, the lineage of a few kings, to the nearest. So you have the Marathas.
Okay.
Right? I think that would be an easier and more comprehensible phase that we can anchor in.
Sure, yeah.
Right? So, of course, the glory was during the Chola empires, where the maximum number of temples were getting built, because that was the period of extreme peak of art and culture across our country, right? And with relevance to Bharatnatyam, of course, that period is very important for us, because a lot of compositions were happening, a lot of temple architecture was built. So it was a very vibrant era for literature, for poetry, for textiles, for jewelry, for iconography, for metallurgy, for different kinds of architecture, for sculptures. And of course for dance and for music and poetry and things like that. So, and it was also the seat of language, the Marathi, and then the Tamil poetry, the Sangam literatures, and the various body of work that happened. Yeah. So, and from then, of course, you kind of link to all the other dynasties, and up until our Vijayanagar empire and the Hoysala architecture, and then until the British had a prominent presence in our country. So you're talking about a very large amount of time that we can look back at our history and the evolution of our arts, I would say.
300 years maybe?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, if you look at Tanjavur, the Tanjavur temple itself is 1,000 years old. So I would say about 1,500 years.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, if you have to look at a recent history, I would say about 300, yeah.
So I also learned a little bit of this community, what the name that you...
Isai
Vallalar, right? Generally referred to as the Devadasi community. I also read that this Madras presidency was actually not just Tamil Nadu. It also went till Maharashtra and there also, right? So this community has a presence even in those geographical areas also. Is that correct?
Absolutely. See, again, we have to kind of go back historically and see how these particular, what we now call the states, the geographical boundaries were different when the kings were ruling, right? And again, when I'm talking about the Isai Vallalar community, it's much more recent. So we've always had the concept of dancers and musicians and the artists guilds from the beginning, right? So they were, their presence was there in the length and breadth of our country. For example, if you go near the Godavari belt, you had the Kalamantalus, right? So the point really being is that at every different point of time, there has always been a guild of people or a guild of artists who have learned, who have safeguarded our arts, and who have made the effort to pass it on. So, like how today, if we call, the Bangalore dance industry or the Chennai dancers or whatever, right? We are basically nothing but a guild based on a particular geography. So that has always been the case. So what I'm just trying to arrive at is that one cannot just say it's just these people. If you look at our entire country, in fact, I would say Pan-Asia, because if you go back, one of the things that we learned in our MFA was, the commonalities between Indian dance, and if you even look at Indonesian dance and the Asian countries, if you take, there's so many commonalities.
Yeah.
So this concept of the artistic guild and artistic community has always been a constant through the evolution of our country itself, from the kings to the invasions to whoever else governed us. So I think it has always been an identity of our Bharata. So that's just the way it is.
Okay. So these guilds, if I'm not wrong, these guilds were part of either the palace or the temples that were, part of those cities that were there, right?
Yes.
So all the arts or anything to do with learning, knowledge, learning or anything to do with culture, it was all centered around the temples, if I'm not wrong.
Absolutely. Because one of the things that we studied was the fact about how the cities were actually temple cities, because the temple was the economic center of the city, right? So how flourishing your temple was directly proportional to how economically successful that particular area was.
So basically the temple was the economic center.
It was the economic center. So therefore, every activity was revolved and evolved around that particular temple. So they became the epicenter for everything, and more so for art, because when you look at a temple, if you just leave the religious part aside, if you just look at it as a space where people are coming together to inhabit, and then you have like a sculpture, and then you have a musician and somebody who's doing a kainkariam there. So there is no choice but to have an interdependent community, right? So that's how it was.
Right. And people who stay around the temple used to, be part of the temple.
Yeah, be a part of it. They would come and they would do whatever voluntary work that they had. I'm sure there must have been a lot of interaction, a lot of give and take. There were sadhasis that was happening. There were debates. There were academic, declarations that happened. There were academic debates that was happening. People would go to the temple to even do the arangetram of their work. In fact, if you go to the Srirangam temple, that is actually a very small mandapam where it says the Kamban mandapam, where Kamban, who actually wrote the Kamba Ramayanam, which is a very popular version of Ramayanam in the Tamil literature. So that's a place where he actually did the arangetram, of where he actually got the entire sadhas, and he declared that he's written it, and he spoke about it. So I think it was just a great space in that particular area for the entire people to come together and have a very culturally enriching exchange and learning, I'm sure. Yeah.
But then if you look at it right now, the temples are not such places anymore. Temples are just to go and pray and then come back. That's how it has turned out to be. So where did that shift happen? Did it happen gradually, or did it happen like all of a sudden? Was it the British rule, or what went?
Yeah, I think, see, from what I read and from what I understand, every artistic creative effort, right, it has a high, it has a low, and then it hits a plateau. Right? So I think we are in that plateau where not much is happening for a long time. And unfortunately, right now we are at a position where not much can be done, even if one wants to. Okay. So to kind of peg it up at a very important aspect or an important time was when especially the dance was taken away from the temple precincts with the Devadasi Act. All those who were
there is an act for it?
Yes, there is a Devadasi Act, wherein the Devadasis were kind of removed from the temple. Okay. They were not allowed to offer their services to the temple
And what
anymore.
was the reason for it?
There are many, of course, factors, but one of the thing was the perception that it was a moralistic viewpoint.
Okay.
That they were having to have an alternate kind of a lifestyle, and it was not going well with the fabric of the society, and there are claims that there were abuses, and young girls were dedicated to the temple, and all that thing that comes with it, right? But there was actually the fact also that there were people from the Devadasi community, who wanted to break that particular ritual of dedicating, women to a particular temple. So with that, the Devadasi Act was passed, and dancing in the temples or dedicating dancers to the temples were stopped. So that also happened in such a way that an entire community who were doing that work day in and day out, who were part of the rituals of the temple, were also not allowed to do that anymore. So it was not just about them not dancing, it was also the fact that they could not continue their rituals. Like, for example, you have a ritual where the Devadasi will go and do the Kumbha Arati in the temple. So with the act, those things came out. So basically, you removed a whole bunch of them away from the temple. And because temples were economic centers, of course, the loot happened. And then there was no king to protect the temple anymore. Right. And whatever the temple was supposed to mean or what it meant so far, I think that entire narrative just changed. So now what has remained is the structure and then the ritual within. And now temples are just reduced to a space where you go, you pray, you do your whatever, Vendidal, or if you have a prayer and you say you do it, and then you come out. So the art and architecture has been completely disconnected from the center. Right. So that is what happened.
And so then once that deterioration happened, every art, let's say you mentioned sculpture, you mentioned painting or music or anything, then just started spreading.
Absolutely.
To individual. Individuals had to take it forward.
Absolutely.
It was not a temple anymore, or probably some people got together and they made a group and then they just continued it from then on.
Absolutely. And that was also the time during Indian independence, right? So then the way we look at history and the way it is recorded, one of the narratives is that when it comes to dance, with respect to dance, right, that's also when cinema was just coming in. So a lot of these dancers got into cinema. In fact, the Varuvurar is very famous, like, for actually choreographing for the monochrome cinemas, the black and white. And again, cinema then was more like an extension of these dance and natakas that were happening, right? It started with those mythological movies. It's not the cinema that we are familiar right now. Right. So some of them who were able to perhaps adapt to that new situation and were able to handle it, found a way into getting into dance choreography in the movies and things like that. But I think the core was removed. What the community stood for, the ethos, that was completely taken away. And you're right, it was scattered. And not just that, even the sthapatis, the iconographies went. You don't find that kind of a fine work, because again, they're all a part of the Agama Shastras. So you can't just take a stone and sculpt it and say this is this is some murti, right? You have to follow a ritual, and it has to be passed on through your ancestors, and there is a vidhi, there is a way to do it. Right? Those were very strictly adhered to then, which is why even today when we look at some of those sculptures, whether you look at the Hoysala architecture or you look at the Chola architecture, right? There's something that is so alluring in that. It's just not some piece of art.
You just get attracted.
Yeah, and there's so much in that, right? Yeah. And of course, the philosophy, right? When a sthapati looks at a mud clay, or he is just looking at a metal, he perhaps sees a devata there. Yeah. Right? It's not just a metal for him. He's it's his reverence. And that's exactly what even our dance was too. So when a dedicated dancer goes to the temple and she's waking up the deity, it's not dance. She's waking up the deity. She's doing the harati to the deity. And then in the night she comes back and she puts the deity to sleep. She helps him sleep by singing. Like in the Kerala, you have the sopana music and all that, right? So they're also intertwined, no? It's a kainkariam, it's a part of their life, it's their duty. It's something that they do it with a lot of integrity, and it's just what they do. Yeah. And then suddenly you tell them you can't do this anymore. It must have been the most difficult period for all of them. I mean, I don't think I can even imagine sometimes.
So then, okay. From my reading, whatever I've understood so far is that the colonizers wanted to break the system. They obviously must have seen that this temple is the center of everything that is going around here, right? So is it, I mean, does history say that it's the colonizers who start doing this sort of breaking of the thing, or how is it?
I actually, I definitely have to, reference this. This is one book that I'm kind of reading right now. This is called as The Flight of Deities and Rebirth of Temples.
Okay.
So I would urge everyone who's interested in our history and in our temples and our art to kind of read this book. This is by Dr Meenakshi Jain. It's a wonderful book.
Okay.
She actually traces in this book how the temples were annihilated from the Mughals, right? And it's a compelling read. What happened systematically? Why they broke the idols, and it also records the battles between our own kingdoms.
Yeah.
The Cholas against the Pandyas and the Cheras, as and when the kingdoms were trying to establish their supremacy. Of course, there were wars, but the difference being that what they did to us and what we did amongst ourselves. So there's a very beautiful reference here where it says that now if you take a king who's kind of trying to conquer, he's going on a war to conquer other places, right? And if he wins a war against another king, he will bring that idol and he will resurrect that idol in his kingdom and build a big temple.
Right.
The tatparyam, or the intention being that particular deity should not be the cause of the defeat. That deity has to come back and flourish in another place.
Okay.
So we don't have any records of how a Chola broke some sculpture somewhere, or a Chola broke away. Whereas we do have enough evidences about how the other dynasties came and they broke our temple. And there are some very moving instances recorded in this book where they broke our sculptures and used it for some other buildings and things like that. So
also, it could be because they knew that it is the economic center. Why would they break it?
Of course, there are many narratives to it. So you see, again, I think in my reading of history, in what I'm continuing to read, the greed for power and what power can do to you is so vast.
Yeah.
And our history records several such, reasons why somebody wants to establish their power, and for that power, what they want to do. And of course, our temples being the seat of, a lot of money, right? Of course, they would reach out to that. And coming back to your question, of course, when finally the British came and they took over and things like that, it had its own repercussions and it hit our cultural fabric. What was very well guarded, of course, kind of moved away. And then the last of it was when the Act came, and then it just got...
So let me sort of put it on a timeline. First, it was the invaders who came in, which was the Islamic invaders who came in. They basically wanted to break the system. I mean, they physically also broke the temples. And then it was the colonizers who came in.
Yes.
Probably I have not read, they didn't destroy it
but
much.
They attacked us on a different
level, which is the socio-cultural level.
Absolutely.
They tried to change our content.
Absolutely.
Basically, they said, okay, because the intent of both the invaders was probably conversion.
See, again, from my understanding, what I believe and observe is that I don't think we can say this is it. It could also be conversions. It could also be a power play. It could also be about wanting to
loot.
It could also be about erasing another culture. It could be so many things, and it is so many things. I wouldn't like to say it is just one thing, because it is not. So the one thing that history reading history, reading and understanding our history is that it can never be a linear narrative. There are so many aspects to it.
So
and
many
once you
layers
start,
and-
so many layers. And once you start reading and understanding, you're only digging more. So it's, for me personally, it would be hard to say, okay, this is the only purpose they came with. There are multiple purposes and there were multiple repercussions because of that, of what they did.
So ultimately, whatever happened, that the temple system, the guild, just broke.
Yes.
And then it's not just pertaining to, I had this question earlier also, it's not just pertaining to the south of India or possibly as a dance form, not just Bharatnatyam, but there are other forms of dance across India also, right?
Yes.
All these, I don't know, let me come back to that question, because whatever I have learned, it's like Bharatnatyam was always associated with, if you go back to history, teachers, and then finally it goes to the community in the temple, and then that's how it goes. But I don't know much about other art forms.
Yes.
Like for instance, Yakshagana, I'm not sure whether it is, I've heard that it is part of an offering to a temple. And then I don't know much about Odissi. I don't know much about the performances that people do in Assam.
Yes.
or Kathak.
Yes.
All these things, what are their kind of histories? A little.
Yeah.
If you can touch on.
Very similar to us. For example, like I mentioned, we had, of course, we have a lot of references to the Kalavantula community from the Godavari belt, from the Andhra Pradesh. And of course, we have a lot of references to the Atams in Kerala. You have the Krishnaatam, you have the Mohiniyattam,
Yeah.
of course, and you have the Dasiyattam there, and then you have Kathakali, of course. And then even in Puri, Odisha, you have the Orissa, which actually was associated with the Puri Jagannath temple.
Okay.
Right?
All those also were.
Yes,
associated.
absolutely.
Okay.
So they were, like I said, the length and breadth of our country was flourishing with art, music, dance, poetry, literature, and iconography. Right? When you look at the entire Bharatavarsha, we were a very culturally rich country.
Yeah.
In terms of its aesthetic appeal. You name it,
And
we
also
had it.
economically.
Of course,
Yeah.
right? You name it, we have it.
Yeah.
So, and even today, of course, if you go up, you have the Mayur Bhanj, and then you have the Chow. They still follow the Vaishnavite tradition. So they will, in fact, not even dance for Shiva. It's very Vaishnavite in tradition,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So they still do the Vishnu composition, Satriya, you take. So they've all stuck to their, to that ethos and to what that particular dance form meant to them. Right? So, like I mentioned before, we've always been a guild of people who have learned, and for a particular time period, we safeguard.
Yeah.
And as is, we need to pass it on to the next generation.
Yeah.
So that is how the continuum is always, kind of flowing. It's ever flowing. So that's how it's always been. And I'm sure it will continue to be that way.
Okay. So again, coming back to the guild, it was a guild of people, and then it always had the patronage of the king of that time, in that particular location. And then slowly that broke, and now there is no guild, but those temples are being managed mostly by the government.
Yes.
Right? So that probably is not going to change, or I don't know whether that guild will come back. And what is your thought on that?
See, I think this is a question that I ask myself too. The more we look at history and you understand how rich it was, and then you're mapping to your current time, right? And then you're saying, okay, even if I have a temple, even if I'm a dancer or a singer or I'm a sculptor, what is it that I can do? Can I go today and dance in a temple? I can't.
Yeah.
Can I, if I'm a sculptor, can I go and just start sculpting and install one thing in the temple? I cannot do that. Right? If I'm a painter, can I just go start painting in a temple? I cannot do that, right? So this is a question I ask myself. Sadly, I believe that we have come very far. I don't think we can go back to that era ever again. And much has changed too, right? I mean, today we even have a lot of people who are even questioning their beliefs and what all these means to them, which is okay. So can we go back to the era, or can we go back, or can we recreate a time, or can we foresee a time where temples can become epicenters of culture? And I don't think so at all. So I think now, what do we do about it? I really don't know. I'm asking myself that question. It pains me, but I think within the, what do you say, the situation we are in right now, there are possibilities, but for those possibilities to come through, it requires a great power and someone who believes in the system. See, for example, if you take a few temples, like you take Chidambaram, the Natyanjali happens on Shivaratri, right? If you take the Kapaleshwara temple in Chennai, they have their annual Margari festival. So you have in Karnataka, you have the Hampi Utsav. Then you have the Konark Utsav. So these things are happening, but they are more like a cultural extravaganza. It happens at that one, either in December or January or in some month by the Ministry of Culture. They'll call the same people, same dancers again.
Yeah.
No one knows how one gets there. You need to have power. Somebody has to recommend, blah, 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 and all that stuff, right? So then those things are just becoming a backdrop. It's becoming like a a scenic, where you can just go dance and you can take pictures and put it on Instagram. Right? But what we were then was that dance music was keeping the temple alive. It was one of the energy quotients of that particular space, which it is not right now, sadly. And I don't know if we'll ever get back there, which is very sad.
Okay. I don't know what to say. I mean, I was hoping there is some solution to this, but I don't know. I mean, because the complete essence is gone if it is out of a temple. Because if you break the system and you have actually broken it into pieces, to get all those pieces together back again, I don't know.
Yeah, and we've also moved very far away from that time and space, right? And I think also dance itself has become more performative in nature right now. What was once a part of a ritual is not a ritual anymore. I don't think there are any ritualistic dancers. Right? For example,
it has become a stage show.
Yeah, and I mean, I might say that, okay, in that space, if I keep a vigraham, I'm energizing the space, all that is there. But that is not akin to me. And I also can't do a ritual dance, right? Because I have to come in that vidhi, I have to come in that sampradaya, right? So, of course, that's gone. I don't think we'll ever get that again. Definitely not ritualistic dancing. And even through the time, dance has moved far away, even in thought, perhaps even in its integrity value, right? Where we are today is
far away from
far away from what it was before.
So there's a clamor going on. I mean, I don't know how far that will be true or whatever, to free temples from the government.
Yes.
That clamor is going on.
Yes.
Do you think if that happens, communities can really, come together and run this, bring it back to that kind of at least not if 100% is not possible, but at least 0.1% of it?
I'm all for temples coming away from the latches of the government. Absolutely. And I have been in whatever very minuscule ways. I always talk about freeing Hindu temples, and it's been a very small voice, but I very firmly believe in that cause, and I believe that our temples should belong to us. Because of practically what is happening in the temples, how the money is getting, where it is getting used, and what is happening. I'll tell you a very simple example. So we have our Kuladevam, that is my husband's Kuladevam. It's a very small Murugan temple in a small town called as Tenkasi, which is down Madurai. We've been visiting the temple for about 20 years now. It's a very quaint temple. It's on a hillock. And it's believed that Agastya Muni was there, and there is also a Durga, Sannidhanam there. And over these years, it was always, our trips there was, we would climb up the hill. It's got about 200 steps, and we would have the darshanam of Muruga, and we would come by. It was a very quiet temple, and there was the Vadyars traditionally who've been taking care of that temple. We went there this year. Now with the HRC coming in, it's unbelievable what they have done to the temple.
HRC is
that's the
Hindu religious.
Yes, I think you'll have to look up that correctly.
Yeah, okay. It's
the HRC.
It's the body that takes
care of the entire temple.
Okay,
right? Administration of the Hindu temples.
Yeah.
Right. So the first thing they done is that they have come in and they have done tickets for everything. And what they do is they put these blaring
lights.
The speakers, and they are playing that Pade Galata Shirgali Govindarajan, those devotional songs in blaring music. Okay, and then all the vendors have come, and the way they are selling it up, come look at Muruga, 25 rupees for your Archana, come do it. So, and I'm like, what has happened to this temple? And this is in a quaint corner where nobody knows. It is not even one of the popular temples, right? So then you imagine what is happening to the actual temples. And then in the Sannidhi, the person who is actually doing the arati is actually not supposed to be there. But this whole thing about anybody can come and do anything. You do 1 3-year course, you do 1-year course, you can come.
It's like an employment.
Yeah.
You create a brand and then you create a company and then...
Yeah, so I'm perplexed. I don't know what is happening. And as not just an artist, and even as someone, who believes in what our temples should mean to us, when I go to a particular Sannidhi, why I'm going. And if one is also on a spiritual path, you're looking at different kinds of energies, and you're looking at what that space does to you and why you are going to that particular space.
Yeah.
So many such things are like, again, I keep saying we can never have a linear narrative. There are multiple things and the more you dig, the more perspectives that you can get. But the fact remains that our temples are being looted, of course, and they are being misused. And also, day before yesterday, I was seeing this visual. So you have the Chidambaram temple, and on the panel in one of the entrances, right, you have the Karanas.
Yeah.
So they have actually dug a hole in between and put one pipeline. The most beautiful sculptures have one tap, one electric wiring that is happening. And there are temples wherein an entire panel has been shut with concrete to put a crowbar somewhere for something else.
Yeah.
And in the name of kind of maintaining the temple, paints are kind of just being splashed across the walls, which means that whoever is doing all this has no idea of the history behind that. Right? And it's just a matter of time where we don't need any dynasty to come and plunder us anymore. We are doing a fantastic job of that by not paying heed to it and how dirty it is.
Yeah. No, I mean, whoever the colonizer or invaders are very successful in dividing us and making us think colonial and then not valuing our own stuff.
Absolutely, you said it. We don't value it at all. We just don't value it.
They're like highly successful in that, and they don't need to do anything at all.
Yes, we don't. We're doing a fantastic job of keeping that, really.
Right. But by the way, Chidambaram is still run by a community today.
It is run by the Dikshitas,
and I mean, in terms of the energy levels, I can probably, this is from my personal experience. Yes. I had been to Madurai Meenakshi and Chidambaram almost at the same one day after the other. The energy levels at Chidambaram is completely way different than Madurai, because Madurai, they have a lot of bureaucracy, security, all those things have come in, and then it just dilutes the whole thing. And I asked something to the priest. he didn't know anything about it. He didn't
Yes.
have a clue about the temple.
Yes.
I was like, aren't you here for a long time now? He said, I'm
I'm employed here
I'm
right
employed
now,
here.
right?
He's just an employee.
Yeah.
So it's so sad to actually, see that.
Yeah.
Whereas at least to some level, the community of Dikshidars
Yes.
are running Chidambaram so
Yes.
well and with all the proper, pujas and
Yes.
whatever. But
Yes.
that is happening only on the pujas and the timings and all that. But the other activities are not there.
Yes.
Like you mentioned.
Yeah. You can't dance in
You can't
Chidambaram,
dance,
yes.
and there is no music or
Yes.
anything. So I
Yes.
don't know whether it happens. I'm not sure, but that's the because because that community is really really scared of doing anything.
Yes.
Because once they do something, it is the government that enters and say, oh, you did this, oh,
Yes.
you did that.
Yes.
They sort of keep poking their nose all the time.
Absolutely.
Because they're always fearful of, okay, can we do this or can we not?
Yes.
So they're always in that kind of thing.
Yes.
So,
Again, like I said, it's multifold. In fact, in Tanjavur, I had a chance to interact with the Oduvar. Oduvars are who sing Tevarams. Tevarams are traditional hymns sung in tribal temples. And there is a community called as the Oduvars, the one who recites these.
do they?
They exist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was having a very similar conversation with this particular Oduvar, and he had a different take on it. So he said, Madam, he was telling me in Tamil, he said, Madam, if today, because there is a government control, I'm getting money every month. I can take care of my children. I can give them education. Tomorrow, if the government control goes, whoever is going to come to take care of this temple, if they are going to go by the hierarchy, if they are going to have their own power play, I don't know if I'll get my monthly salary. I'm worried. So, like I said, in a way, we are in such a soup.
Yeah.
How do you find a solution that will work in such a way that all these things are taken care of?
Right.
If somebody who's going to take over the temple is going to understand the value of it and is going to ensure that the administration is done well, then we are safe. But we don't know.
Yeah.
Of course, the people who are fighting for it will be cognizant of that fact, and they will do their homework. If we get through and we do live to see the era where the government lets go of our temples and we get it back, then who's taking control? How they administer the temples? What changes they bring back? That is also another Herculean task.
Yeah.
I mean, first to undo the damage that has been done, to resurrect the temples, to re-energize it, to rejuvenate it. So it's multifold. I don't think we can have a single solution for everything.
No,
But
I mean, as examples, there are other religious communities who are running that show. They don't have governmental control on their, whether it's a church or a mosque or any other or a Parsi temple. There is no governmental control there.
Yeah. So, but again, our Hindu temples work on different layers, right? Ours is not a single. We cannot compare the way our temples run with that of how a church runs or how a mosque runs. The dynamics are totally different.
Okay.
What happens inside a temple has so many things. So I'm interested to see where this is going.
So as possibly modern citizens or like yourself, a dance teacher or a dancer or a practitioner, or even people who are learning dance as of now, what do you think each of us can do to ensure? I'm not saying let's walk towards coming back, getting back the community and making that's like a really uphill task, but at least in our day-to-day lives to at least have that essence of what was it before, and at least have that what can be done.
I think what is very, very important is we first must read our history. We must read our Puranas. We must read our literature. We must understand why these temples were there, who built these temples, how they built these temples. And today, with so much of information at our handtips, we should first read. We should understand. That's the first thing. Second thing is that I was listening to this one very beautiful um, podcast, I think, where that particular uh, person who was talking, he was saying that we don't value what we inherit.
Yeah.
We should do that. Regardless of what your religious, your spiritual beliefs are. The fact that this is a part of our country, you have to value it. And what does that value mean at the basics, right? So one thing that really bothers me is when I go to a temple, what attire do you go in a temple?
Yeah.
Okay, I see in Chidambaram temple girls coming in shorts, in jeans. Okay, you see, this is not about picking them and things like that. I'm saying there's a context. You're entering a different kind of a space. There is a context to that space. So rever it. Right? And just what like do you do there? Yeah. What do you do there? You come, you're clicking selfies and you know, you're... so it basically comes down to, are you valuing what you have? If you go to a temple and that temple has a certain energy, are you respecting that? Right? And as dancers and as teachers and as practitioners, it's very important for us to have a good know-how. Whether you want to practice that spiritual belief, whether you want to go there and pray or not is your individual thing. But you need to have a certain sense of responsibility of holding on to what is ours. Yeah. So I think you have to inculcate that respect. That's saying, hey, this is our history. These are our temples and my art belongs here. Yeah. So when I walk into a temple, I'll be watchful. You know, I'll be mindful of what I am doing. And when I'm talking about it, I will talk with that know-how. And as a performer, when you're performing about it, you know your subject well. If you're just saying a Bani, a Guru, you know, if I say I'm a Vaduvurar Bani, I have gone to the Vaduvurar temple. Yeah. I have seen that Shiva there. I have danced there. So when I dance my compositions, I know where I'm coming from. So, right? So these are all very basic things that we should do. First, be aware. Read. Yeah. Make it a point to read about your history, your temples, your Puranas. Right. You should know. Yeah. You don't have to kind of... do anything about it or, hold a flag. But you should know.
Yeah, the same people who question why the dress code in a temple will do the same thing if they are invited for a high tea party.
Yes.
They wear a, the themed dress, whatever they have. Yeah. But then they sort of negate the fact that in a temple you're supposed to have a dress code.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, not just that. Increasingly, I think now every time I go to a temple, my antennas are like so high because I'm constantly watching around. Even our general conduct in an energized space, right? Constantly talking, constantly clicking pictures. You come outside, you're clicking selfies. And what are you in that space for? Right? When you go into a temple, are you going to a temple to click selfies? What are we... we've gone to that level now. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So even culturally, we are so moving far away from what it means to be in these spaces and how mindful we are and how we value these.
Is it because spirituality is not taught from a young age?
I don't know, Praveen.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because spirituality is confused with religious practices and, the rituals.
There are so many narratives now. This gets into... See, this is also something that happens in our dance field, right? So, can a religious person dance? I don't believe in Shiva. How can I do a Shiva Varnam? I'm an atheist. Can I do Bharatnatyam? Of course you can. You cannot Bharatnatyam, you can do Odissi, you can do Kathak. You don't have to be some spiritually enlightened master to do our cultural or our art forms, right? At the very basic essence, it's a simple craft. It has a structure to it, it has a logic to it, it has a science to it. So you have a good body, you have a rhythm sense, you have a malleable face, and you're able to understand the language. Anybody can dance if they are taught in a particular way. Now your spirituality, your own seeking, your own beliefs, they only add layers to what you do with your art. Now, if I'm atheist, can I dance? Yes, I can dance. Right? My dance perhaps will just be a fantastic craft. I practice and practice and I do so well with it. So as I say, okay, when I'm dancing Shiva, I don't know who Shiva is. Sure, even I don't know who Shiva is. I've not seen him, right? The difference is you believe, you choose to believe and you pursue on that belief. I choose not to believe. It is okay. Right? So again, I'm saying when you start reading, when you start understanding where all this is coming from, I think you will get more clear on what your art means to you. So I think that is why it is very important. Now everybody is making a noise about how I'm not religious and therefore this is not inclusive. Actually, it's not like that at all. If you are a spiritual person, then your art will speak in a different way. Yeah. That's all there is to it. Yeah. As it will in any other facet of your life. Now, if you are a spiritual person or if you're a mindful person, the way you behave with me, the way you are as a person in your day-to-day life itself will change. Yeah. And therefore, your art will also change. Right. I mean, it's just one aspect of our expression. Yeah. Right? I don't know why there is so much of noise about. I mean, frankly, I find it illogical. I don't think you have to kind of mix up everything and make a big noise about it and go all for changing. And I think it's just too much of noise. Okay. I don't think it's required at all.
So, also, I think this generation or the younger generation are very distracted in terms of attention span is lower and it is getting worse and worse by the day. So maybe the way forward is to have content like this that they can at least be listened to or something digitally, and they can sort of get an inspiration and start reading about their own stuff. Yes, could be that.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think a lot of that responsibility comes with dance teachers. First, dance teachers should read. Yeah. They have to understand. Right. Yeah. And when they are passing on the baton, they have to pass it with that much of a responsibility. Yeah. Now, for example, when I teach my children, I'm only saying things as is. Now, do I have children who come and said, I don't believe in it? Sure, I do. Now, I don't have to sit and convince them that there is a Shiva somewhere taking. Yeah. I'm saying you read. Yeah. You take your time, and what it's going to do to you, what you're going to believe is your journey. Yeah. But if you are coming to learn from me and I am teaching you Bharatanatyam, this is the context. Yes. Now, for me, on my personal responsibility, I will tell you this is what it is. Yes, I do believe there is Shiva. And I do believe that there is a rootedness in our tradition. And I will pass it on to you. Yeah. Like I have learned it from my teacher. Yeah. Now, what you do with it is up to you. Right. But I will tell you, this is what it is. Yeah. So that even the teachers have a responsibility. So apart from just telling them, you do your dance, you focus on 1,000 other cross training and have a size 0 body and go get that music academy program or get that award. You also tell them, give them books to read and say, read about this. Yeah. Read about our history. Yeah. Read. Let's talk about and debate it about later. First, read. Know. Be aware. Yeah. Yeah. Right? And the younger generation, it's not that they don't know. In fact, I have met a lot of youngsters who are very interested in our history. In fact, they know so much more than us. And I do find that the younger generation are a lot more easy to work with. They have a certain sense of, dedication. They're able to put in that effort. They are very promising. But I think what the gap I see is conviction. And somebody to tell them, hey, stay the course. You will find your light. I feel less of that happening. Okay.
Some reassurance.
Yes, some reassurance. And we as teachers, our seniors and the legendary dancers, so they all have to give that hope. Wherever we can, we should keep telling the future generation that there is hope. Yeah. You read, you understand, you will find, you have to give them hope. You can't just say that, everything is bad and, you'll not find anything. Then there is no point in, even practicing an art form, right? And one thing art teaches you is it teaches you hope. It's a new, every time you do your art, it is new. That itself is so fascinating. No? So then how can you tell them that life is so bad? It's not.
So with that, I think we sort of came to the conversation of hope. So what do you have to say as a parting shot to this podcast, at least?
I don't know. I think personally, when I look at my students and their generation, right, I do see a whole generation of very promising, very driven dancers. They are willing to put in that much of work. They are willing to give up everything in their life to dedicate themselves to dance, and they're a very promising lot. They're very driven, and they don't have too much of inhibitions, and they kind of just go with the flow, and if it doesn't work, they're willing to just drop it and pick up something else. So we do have a generation that is very promising. But I think like I said, we need to reassure them. We need to tell them to slow down a little bit. We need to tell them that don't take it so seriously that it becomes an hindrance to your life. And we need to tell them to enjoy their art. And we need to tell them to find happiness in their art. And happiness is not directly proportional to the number of performances, awards, and number of likes and followers you have on Instagram and social media. Your parameter for your happiness is, if you are in practice, is it making you a more joyful person? If you are in practice of dance, is it making you a more aware person? If you are in the practice of dance, is it making you a happy person? If you are in the practice of dance, are you becoming a better person every day by whatever pace that is? And are you enjoying your practice?
Right.
I think we need to tell them that. Enjoying dance and making it a size 0 and saying, okay, today I dance from 9 o'clock till 8 o'clock. Sure, I mean, fantastic that you have that kind of a stamina, but that is not all that is there in the art form. So I would just tell them that, hey, watch the path, enjoy yourself, chill a little bit. Don't take it so seriously and stay happy. I think that's what I would like to tell the younger generation.
Probably that will come with reading also.
Absolutely. In fact, when you look at, when you read the struggles that, they all went through, we lead a far more happier life. So all we just have to do is, keep our art in a happy space and dance with that much of joy. And be mindful of our feelings and emotions and see where we are at it. I think that would be my parting shot.
Well, ma'am, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, Praveen.
And I'm sure there is more to talk.
Yes.
We will talk more.
Yes.
There is, to tell the audience, Ramaa ma'am is also I would call her the column artist. She has done, I don't know how many thousands of columns. What was the
around that.
She's about to release a book on columns itself. So hopefully. that is going to be another episode that we will do.
Yes.
But so far what we have spoken, was amazing.
Thank you so much, Veen. It was nice to reminisce and just share whatever little I know. So
thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Namaskaram.